So with 2012 almost over, I thought I'd take a little look back on the last year and a little bit at the 224 NES games that I've been able to beat. This is the actual stack of games that I've beaten. Every single one of them's in there. So soak that in for a minute, and then we will do a little breakdown and kind of take a closer look at some of the games that jumped out at me for various reasons over the year. So with over 200 games this year, you'd think there'd be a lot of real painful games in there. But there's really only 3 that stood out to me as just awful, things that I most likely will not play again. And those 3 are Bill and Ted's Excellent Video Game Adventure, Back to the Future 2 and 3, and Where's Waldo. The reason I didn't like Bill and Ted so much was because the maps were a decent size and I found them very confusing. A lot of the landmarks looked identical. The guys you have to find and the items you have to find are, well, the items are in really obscure areas, and the characters you have to find are randomly generated, so even if I found them one time and then failed, I'd have to look for them completely different spots the next time. There were different doors you could go in when you entered houses that would warp you around the map, which would theoretically speed it up, you'd think, but I found that just even more confusing, so I generally just exited the house the same way I came in and wandered the slow way around until I found everyone, which took a long time, but at least it got done. Now, for someone who found Bill and Ted confusing, Back to the Future 2 and 3 was just a nightmare. It was take Bill and Ted's confusing maps times like 3, because there were 3 different time zones you had to travel between to find these weird obscure items and odd doors, but you had to find keys to go into, and then you had to take said item to specific locations which were also obscure in order to return them, and you have to do that like 32 times I think it was, to finish the first part of the game, and then you get to the second part. Because there's no save features or passwords or anything like that, you have to, I ended up playing about 5.5 to 6 hours straight to get the passcode to Back to the Future 3. 3 was much shorter, but the puzzle rooms were a lot more challenging, which was okay. Some of them, I actually did enjoy a few of the puzzle rooms, not so much in the third part as the second part, but they were just a small distraction from the otherwise painfully confusing game. And lastly was Where's Waldo. I just don't think the NES graphics were up to what they needed at the time for such a game. I had such trouble finding that stupid guy because everything just looked the same. And then to make matters worse, in some levels they changed those classic Waldo colors that you're trained to look for, you know, the red, white, and blue. He would be like brown and green, so it was just really challenging to find him. The actual gameplay is only under 10 minutes long, but it took me hours and hours of trying to find that stupid guy on every level. It was just not a fun experience. Now, this handsome group of games is the few that gave me the most trouble, and there's a wide variety of genres here, so I like to think of myself as a fairly balanced gamer. But there was a couple from various genres that just were brutal. It took me a long time to figure out how to come across whether it was the entire game or just one section. There was something about each of these that really had me struggling. Now, Joust is one of those games that doesn't have a definite ending. So my goal was to get to a far enough level that I'd experienced every different type of bad guy and been able to beat a level with every different type of bad guy. So my goal is to get to the hardest guys in the game and beat them, which is why it was fairly challenging for me, I think. Cobra Triangle, on the other hand, was just really hard almost the entire way through, And then to top it off, it had a pretty harsh final boss to deal with, who could kill you in one hit. But the levels where you have to protect the people for a certain amount of time, I also found especially challenging. And you run into like about 3 of them, I think, throughout the game. So every time one of those popped up, I kind of had a bit of a struggle again. Anyone who's played Bayou Billy knows that it's pretty tough straight through. The only parts I found kind of easy were the zapper gun parts, which I chose to use the zapper with instead of the controller. I don't know if that made it easier or not, but I had a fairly simple time with those areas. The driving stages though, man, those ones took me lots of attempts to get past with any amount of consistency, and I still crash a lot in them. The beat 'em up parts, you kind of learn some tricks to get you by the bad guys, but those driving parts, they're just harsh. As well as the ending, the last level is really hard. If you don't manage to get a whip with you there, good luck, because I made it there several times without the whip and just lost life after life until I was game overed. And Treasure Master was kind of a neat one, because unlike several other platformers, it's not one hit and you're dead, but it feels like it is. It feels like every hit point in your life meter is extremely valuable, like you're losing a free man every time you get hit. That's probably because your most useful weapon, the boot that you get, you have to get right up close to anything in order to kick them. You do get a gun, but it's got limited ammo and you never get a refill. So you have to get pretty good with the boot and pick which spots you can use your gun at. On top of that, there's lots of backtracking, a little bit of exploring, trying to find each item and then figuring out what it does. Which is something I really liked about the game, but it made it really challenging at some parts because that boot is not the most efficient weapon. You know, most people are probably familiar with Adventure Island's difficulty, so I won't get too much into it, other than to say the last few levels are just brutal. That's where I had most of my difficulty, particularly 8-2 and 8-3 were just savage, really, really challenging. Days of Thunder was kind of unique in that most games, even obscure games or games that most people seem to hate, there's always that one guy out there that loves it and becomes really good at it and writes a FAQ or does a video walkthrough. Days of Thunder was a game where I couldn't find any assistance anywhere on it, so I had to do it all myself from scratch. So I took a lot of playing to figure out how to corner the best, how often to go in for pits, how to pit well enough to not lose 10 spots when you're in there, and then to have a high enough score to beat it, because it's really hard to win a race. And I think I only won one race in the whole season, but I was able to squeak by with enough points to finish it off, which was just, it was really stressful the last couple of races because you put so much into the game. You feel like you're going to win, and if I would have lost, oh, that would have been just frustrating to start all over again from the start. Spy Hunter was kind of like Joust in that it doesn't have an ending, so my goal was to get it to loop through each of the different seasons that it runs you through. And like most arcade games, it's just they make it hard, so you put a lot of quarters in, right? So to get through all the seasons and the initial credits they give you is just a steep order. So it took a lot of practice and a little bit of luck on that one run to finally get past each of the 4 different seasons and have the game start looping backgrounds again for me. Now I seem to be in the minority with this one because I don't think a lot of other people consider Excitebike super challenging, but it gave me a lot of trouble trying to get through all those tracks and have the last one keep repeating. It was, yeah, I spent more time on that than a lot of games that people commonly call challenging, like Battletoads or Ghosts and Goblins. I spent way more time on Excitebike than games like those two. Kind of like Adventure Island, most people are also aware of the difficulty level on Double Dragon. Just those random blocks that shoot out of the wall near the last stage, I don't know how you're supposed to deal with those. It's just, I got pummeled with them every single time. So I basically had to try and get there with enough life to limp through it. After that, I was just getting lucky enough to be able to throw the bad guys off the edge of the stage without them throwing me off. And then the last boss rush is just tough, especially the fight against your brother is just, oh man, I think I beat that with like one hit left, and I'm not too keen on doing it again, even though it is a fun game to play. Now, Dragon Slayer is I thought a hidden gem even, but it seems like most other people really don't like it. I think it's because they try and play it like a platformer instead of a Dragon Slayer game though. But regardless, the game's actually not that hard once you memorize it, kind of like a Dragon Slayer game, with one exception of the final boss. Your character just moves so much slower than the boss's moves coming at you that it is incredibly challenging to dodge all his puff of smokes and either dodge or destroy the baby dragons before they get to you. And then if you're lucky, you can get a hit on them once in a while. Because of your slow movement and the boss's aggression, it took me like over a week of playing this game for hours almost every single day, just trying to memorize his patterns and then realizing he doesn't have patterns. So getting good enough at seeing the signals as early as possible so I could maneuver out of the way, and even then I'd make the wrong maneuver after dodging like 12, 13, 14, 20 different things. Then I'd screw up just by mistake. So that boss is easily the hardest boss I've fought in any game yet, which made the entire game pretty challenging because he's right at the end, right? So you got to go through the whole thing, which, like I said, it gets easier with memorization, but it's still no cakewalk. So to do the whole thing every time you screw up on this boss made the game just really tough. Now, most games like High Speed that are kind of arcade-ish or pinball type games, my goal is just to beat the high score and experience every different type of like mini game or stage that it has to offer. That was really hard with high score because there's tons of mini games. You've got to do all these like levels where you shoot a cannon down or up like a plinko level and try and get it in these little cradles. Really hard. And you do enough of these and these little racing mini games, and it unlocks little bonus items to help you out on the table. One of which is a flying saucer, which flies you off the table and gives you a little message. And then later on, after you've done 5 of these other things, you finally get a rocket ship which blasts you off the table and says you've beaten the system. So one of my goals was to get this rocket ship to blast me off the table, and also to get the high score. And they did not make the high score easy to get on this. I played for just shy of 2 hours, I think it was, to get over 51 million, I think was the high score. And that's a long time to play a pinball game on your original credits. I obviously learned how to gain extra balls because otherwise it just would have been impossible for me. This game is tough because there's enemies coming at the table that are destroying your flippers, that are knocking your ball out of where you want it to go, and just being generally annoying. Like they were really frustrating sometimes, and there were a few glitches I ran into that made it even more frustrating, but luckily they didn't seem to happen too often. And lastly is Werewolf. Not a particularly challenging game for the most part, but there is one stage, I believe it was stage 4, the one with the waterfalls and the falling platforms. It was really a tough stage because there's so many places you can just fall to your death and just die instantly. It took a lot of trial and error to get my way through that stage. The rest of the game, thankfully, wasn't too tough before or after. So once I finally got past that stage, I knew I was going to beat the game. It was just a matter of getting past that one stage, which, yeah, I would inch forward, try and lure bad guys out at some parts, run back until the moving platform was at a certain spot. You'd have to use your super jump here, your regular jump there. It was kind of like Dragon Slayer, where it's just all memorization after a while. Not a lot of skill involved. Just had to know what was coming and when it was coming and how to either get around it or take it out. This I just thought was kind of a unique accomplishment, and that was beating every single Power Pad game on the system. Not that there's a lot of them, there's only 6 as you can see, but it's one of my favorite accessories. Got a little bit of nostalgia for it, but beyond that, the games really aren't that bad. For the most part, they're a lot of fun, and I definitely encourage you to grab a Power Pad if you don't have one already, and check out at least all of them if you can. They're really cheap to find them all. Like, you don't need to get stadium events, obviously. You can get world-class track meet and get the same game, so just give it a go if you have the chance. I find that it's a blast. All of them are worth trying out at least. When I initially planned this out, I had hoped to have a few more segments in here, things like nostalgic games from my childhood, or like hidden gems, things that surprised me type stuff. But I didn't realize how long the video was going to run, so I ended up chopping off a few sections to cut down my total time and the amount of time I've spent editing. So if you do like this kind of thing though, let me know. Post in the comments or throw me a message, and I'd love to do another one if there's interest for it. If you've got any other ideas, things you wanted to know too, feel free to ask questions and I'll do my best to answer them all in another video. So thanks for watching, and please leave me some feedback because I am in desperate need of it. Thanks.